Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, we can go ahead and start. Just making sure people are connecting. There are still people joining. Okay, so we can go ahead and start. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Joint AGU AMS Climate and Health Showcase. My name is Azar Abadi. I'll be your host for today's event. We have an exciting agenda lined up featuring experts in the field of climate and health who will share their insight and research findings. So before we delve into the sessions, I would like to go over a few housekeeping notes and our code of conduct. We are committed to providing a welcoming and respectful environment for all participants. Please be mindful of your language and conduct and treat everyone with kindness and respect. Please make sure your microphones are muted when you are not speaking to minimize background noise. If you have any questions during the presentations, feel free to use the chat feature and we'll address them during the Q&A sessions. And if you are not speaking, please take your put your camera off too as well. So we will limit the distractions as well. Now it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Susan Annenberg, the president of AGU GeoHealth section, and Hunter Jones, the chair of the Board on Environment and Health for the American Meteorological Society and the deputy director of NOAA's Climate and Health Program. They will share a few words to kick off our showcase.
Thank you so much, Azar, and welcome everyone to this second annual showcase. If you could go back one slide, please. It's a real pleasure to be speaking with you today, and I want to start by thanking Dr. Abadi and all the people who really spent a lot of time and effort to organize this day. So thank you very much. Just to very briefly introduce what GeoHealth is for those of you who haven't been involved yet. Our mission is to advance knowledge and improve human and environmental health outcomes by harnessing the energy and expertise of geohealth researchers, practitioners, and leaders. And you can see that we exist at this intersection between Earth systems, health, and humans. So our section of the American Geophysical Union, we organize conference events, workshops, trainings, networking. We engage with policy recommendations. And we also have a thriving geohealth journal that publishes high-quality peer-reviewed research in this field. I wanted to take the opportunity to share with you some of the exciting developments that have occurred among funders in this space, because I think this is a question that we all have is there support for research in geohealth, and how can I get involved with that? So I asked NIH, NSF, and NASA, who have been expanding their opportunities for researchers to work on geohealth issues and climate and health issues. I asked them each to put together one slide on some of their current programs. So I just want to very briefly run through those. Next slide, please. And the first one is NIH, and they're really doing a lot right now, which is really exciting to see. So there's 5 climate change and health research centers that have been announced, and more coming. There's also a climate change and health research coordinating center. There are 4 Alliance for Community Engagement hubs and 2 NIH NSF funded centers, and a climate and health outcomes research data systems or CORDS project. And you can see some of the other resources that they have at the bottom here with their climate and health initiative, a glossary, and a literature portal. So I encourage you all to check those out. Lots of great opportunities to get involved in NIH supported research in climate and health. And next slide. NSF is also expanding opportunities in this space, and they're looking at the interface of climate and health in terms of feedbacks between health, infrastructure, and the environment. forecasting connections between environmental change and human health, and engaging with public understanding of socio-environmental systems and intersecting with health. So they have a number of solicitations that are listed at the bottom here, and I just wanted to highlight specifically the Climate Change and Human Health Dear Colleague letter. This is an opportunity that remains available, and you can see there's several different funding mechanisms for getting support for research in climate and health. The next slide is NASA's opportunities. They have a health and air quality program, which I've been honored to be a part of for some years. Some of the activities are a Health and Air Quality Applied Sciences Team, or HACAS, which is being competed this year. There's also the Health and Air Quality grants are being competed this year too. And they have the GEO-EO4 Health Initiative and Health Community of Practice, which is many members of our community also participate there as well. So a lot of really fantastic opportunities to get involved in climate and health research with support from NIH, NSF, and NASA. And my last slide is just to invite you all to participate in our community. You can see our current leadership here and some of the activities that we do on the left-hand side. Reach out to any one of us, and we'd be happy to, help you figure out how to get involved. And there's also this QR code is a link to a form where you can indicate your interest. And if you'd prefer to go that way, we'll contact you based on your interest there. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the day, and I'll hand it over to Hunter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to echo your thanks to the organizing group that put this together, Dr. Abadi and others. We have a really great agenda today. Last year was the inaugural year that we decided to join forces, AGU and AMS, to share some of the leading science talks from our meetings in an open forum, and I'm pleased that we're doing that again. The AMS board, the American Meteorological Society Board on Environment and Health, has been around for about 16 years, but public health has been part of AMS all along, including in its logo, which was established over 100 years ago in 1919. The AMS Board on Environment and Health advances the understanding of Earth's environmental influences on human health. We view these interactions through the spatial and temporal domains of our science. And our vision is a world where connections between physical and biological macrocosms are accurately identified, and where decision makers, including the general public, apply such knowledge to make informed decisions, ultimately leading to better human, animal, and ecosystem health. Our board consists of 11 full members and 2 student members that represent diverse expertise in environment and health, heat, air quality, water, vector-borne disease, et cetera, as well as equity and community engagement and other disciplines. And our members come from sectors including academia, government, nonprofits, the private sector. Last year, or actually it was this year in January, our meeting in Baltimore was 3 days of fascinating talks from our community, including some award-winning student presentations that hopefully you'll hear from a little bit today as well. And we're also looking forward to the future. The next AMS annual meeting, which is where the next health conference will also take place, is from 12 to 16 January in 2025 in New Orleans, Louisiana. And the theme of the meeting is Toward a Thriving Planet, charting the course across scales. And that dovetails really nicely with the health mission of our board. And it is at that meeting that we will hold our 16th conference on environment and health. And I would invite everyone to get involved. So the call for session proposals for the American Meteorological Society's annual meeting and the Board on Environment and Health conference is open. And so it's open until 25 April 2024. And I'll put the link in the chat for everyone to be able to put in a session topic proposal. But ametsoc.org is where you can go to do that. And then in the meantime, thank you to all who have joined us. We look forward to your questions today and to seeing your session proposals and presentation abstracts later this year, and hopefully seeing you this next winter at AGU and AMS. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan and Hunter, for those warm welcome messages. It's now my pleasure to hand the floor to my colleague, Jen Stowell, who will introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Yang Liu.
Hi, thanks so much. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Stoll, and I'm pleased to introduce our morning keynote speaker, as well as our current GeoHealth section awardee, Dr. Yang Liu. Dr. Liu is the Gangarosa Distinguished Professor and Chair of the Gangarosa Department of Environmental Health at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University. And his research focuses on applying various satellite data products in investigating population exposures to environmental stressors such as things like air pollution, extreme heat, wildfires, and UV radiation, as well as their associated adverse health outcomes, including cancer, cardiovascular diseases, and mental health issues. He is a science team member of the NASA EVI-3 Maya mission and the Terra Miser mission, and a PI member of the NASA Health and Air Quality Applied Science Team, or HACAST. And he's also the director of the NIH-funded Climate and Health Actionable Research and Translation Center. And with that, we'll turn it over to Dr. Liu.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Azar and Susan for the invitation, and thanks everyone for joining this showcase event. My name is Yang Liu. I teach in the School of Public Health, but I'm an environmental engineer by trade. Since this is a joint showcase and I don't often attend AMS meetings, I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about my own research program. So let me share my screen. Okay, 1 second. And okay, so now you should see my slides, right?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, actually, before that, I want to add to Susan's presentation that this year, in fact, NASA has 2 more calls that's related to health. One is the Climate Resilient Communities call that is due in a month. And then the wildfire call also has health and human communities components to it. And also, if you haven't, I think you should pay attention to the EPA calls. EPA has many RFPs that would benefit from geophysical meteorological expertise. So today's topic, my presentation, is the health impacts of wildland fires on the American population. So this topic came to our group about 4 years ago. But in general, our group is a modeling group. At its very core, we build environmental exposure models and generate spatiotemporal exposure estimates and use that to power our downstream applications. For example, our exposure data sets can be used for environmental justice research and climate justice research. We use the exposure estimates together with health data to conduct environmental epidemiological studies. And from there, we can estimate the health effects of various environmental risk factors. And once you have the concentration response relationships established, you can use that to perform health impact assessments. Now, the inputs to our exposure models are pretty diverse. In the early years of my group, we use a lot of satellite remote sensing data from all sorts of Earth observing platforms. In recent years, we have expanded our research horizon to include low-cost sensors, and using low-cost sensors data to supplement the spatial temporal coverage of the regulatory networks. And for our climate side of research, we also help co-design regional climate model simulation scenarios and use that to drive our health effects projections. Within this framework, there's also kind of interactive elements. So for example, in our satellite mission work, we deploy and we operate low-cost sensors together with regulatory monitoring data to conduct hybrid ground truthing for the satellite data and satellite data production algorithms. And we can use remote sensing data and other ground measurements to build bias correction models for the climate model simulations. And then, low-cost sensors, climate model data can also interact with our application areas in EJ, climate justice, health effects research, and health impact assessment. So we have a lot to work on, but I attribute our success, our accomplishments to our wonderful group members. These are the current composition of our group. Mostly we have grad students, PhD students, visiting scientists, full-time research scientists, and other project management staff. So to talk about wildfires, people usually would think that the motivation is very straightforward, right? Climate change and the expanding wildland-urban interface leads to longer fire seasons, larger fires, and more people being exposed to the wildland fires. And the emerging evidence supports that the wildfire's health impact is likely to be different from ambient air pollution, and it's currently understudied. So what we need to do as the initial step is to characterize fire exposure, right? Wildfire exposure. And it is crucial to quantify it before we can assess its association between these exposures and a variety of adverse health outcomes. But I want to argue that the devil's in the details. So specifically, what do we mean by exposure? Is fire smoke the only exposure that can affect human health, right? And what are the health risks? And who are the vulnerable population? All these questions currently don't have a standard answer or commonly accepted answer. And I want to tell you more about my thinking and our work through 3 case studies. Now, these are very sort of health-heavy projects. Without the GeoHealth section, these presentations would never have happened in AGU. But now I feel like the audience, the AGU audience, is more sort of accustomed to hearing the downstream applications of all the geophysical science. And so I'm showing you three examples. And also I want to use these examples to illustrate my points that we still need to think deeply about some of the very fundamental questions that we ask when we examine the wildfire and human health interaction. This study is about acute wildfire-related exposure and anxiety disorder. Second one is a subchronic wildfire-related exposure and lung cancer surgery recovery. And then the third one is I'll show some preliminary results. And this one deals with the chronic fire smoke exposure and dementia incidence. Okay. Now, the first step of doing all of the health effects research is the exposure modeling. And in this case, we built our own PM 2.5 smoke model. And it is a twin model framework. because we want to simultaneously estimate smoke and non-smoke PM 2.5 levels. So we built a pair of models with very comparable model structure. So the total PM 2.5 model is built only in the smoke impacted grid cells. In our study domain, which is the continental US typically, we first design a 1 square kilometer modeling grid, and all the input parameters are gridded, and then the output also will be produced on this grid, right? So our strategy is to build a total PM 2.5 model on this grid, but only in smoke impacted grid cells. And then we build a companion model, which is the background PM 2.5 in all the grid cells. And of course, there's a set of criteria to define or identify smoke impacted grid cells. In the interest of time, I won't go into a lot of detail in that aspect. So for the total PM 2.5 model, or smoke plus ambient PM 2.5 model, we include satellite retrieved aerosol optical depth, a bunch of meteorological parameters, land cover parameters, population density. HMS is NOAA's hazard mapping system that provides smoke contours and cloud fractions, again, from satellite retrievals, elevation data, and then the hard separation of smoke from non-smoke PM 2.5 is included as a CMAX simulation result in there. And then for the background PM 2.5 model, basically we also include CMAC, but the CMAC emissions turn off. So the two models will predict total PM and background PM, and their difference is the smoke contribution. Smoke PM is only calculated in smoke impacted grid cells, and everywhere else, smoke contribution is set to 0. And from a geophysical science perspective, the model development include a lot of satellite data. So AOD from MODIS, the MAYAC product, the NOAA hazard mapping system is also satellite data driven. The cloud fraction data is from NASA MODIS. NLCD is it's a composite Landsat product, and digital elevation is from the Aster instrument. And this model will make daily smoke PM 2.5, total PM 2.5, a mass concentration estimate at 1 kilometer resolution in the continental United States. And this is what it looks like, what the predictions look like, right? We built a model between 2007 and 2018, and this modeling period is defined by the availability of the CMAX simulations. The top two figures show the annual average total PM 2.5 mass concentration. And then the two bottom figures show the smoke PM 2.5 annual mean concentrations. And you can see they have pretty different spatial distributions, and they have pretty different characteristics, right? Typically, we think the West Coast is most affected by fire smoke because of all the big fires. Now, if you look at the lower left figure, that is the 2007 annual mean PM 2.5 smoke PM concentration. And here you see a big blob of red in the southeastern US. And then in both 2007 and 2018, you see Western Texas has some very strong smoke signals. So it's a little bit not straightforward, where it's a little bit counterintuitive that a lot of the small fires that are not reported in the news actually make a significant contribution to the overall smoke PM 2.5 exposure map in the continental US. Data, we did a little bit of a policy relevant analysis. These bar charts showed that how much of the air quality in the United States has been affected by fire. And we're looking at the percentage of days in each of the roughly 1,800 AQS or EPA AQS air quality monitors that are affected significantly by fire. And by that, by a significantly affected fire day, I mean fire smoke PM 2.5 contributes to more than 25% of the total PM. And what this bar chart shows you is that, well, it actually, the smoke impact is probably more than what we normally see or feel. So for example, in the year 2007, 75% of all AQS monitors have been affected by fire smoke for at least a month. And across our entire 12-year study period, on average, 40% of all the AQS monitors have been affected by fire for at least a month. So, fire smoke is becoming a very important contributor to air pollution at a national scale. With this exposure data set in place, we can study a variety of different health effects related to that. And in this first case study, we try to assess if wildfire exposure is associated with emergency department visits due to anxiety disorders in the Western US. So this falls under the sort of the common concept of climate anxiety or eco-anxiety. It's an intuitive concept, but here we set out to quantify this effect. Now, people don't go to emergency department because they had a panic attack. These are anxiety disorders with a official medical diagnosis that's recorded in their official medical record, right? With the ICD-9 code. So this study tried to assess the impact of wildfires on the study population is from 5 Western US states: Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, and Oregon. We identified a total of 1.9 million ED visits for anxiety disorders as their primary diagnosis during our 12-year study period. Okay. And in this study, we took a case crossover design. This is a standard study design for ED visits. And basically what it says and what it does is if a ED visit occurred on day X, which is in a particular week, so it's a week, let's say it's a weekday Y, and all the other weekdays in the same months, regardless of whether that weekday, the control weekday happened before or after the event, will be treated as control. So if there is a case in a particular, in a given Thursday in a month, the other 3 Thursdays in the same month will be used as self-control for this ED encounter. And here, we also want to know, what other wildfire-related exposure metrics can be included in our assessment. So in addition to our model estimated smoke PM 2.5 concentrations, we also included the active fire spots, or as well as the cumulative fire radiated power (FRP) in our IP model. These 2 parameters they're both satellite retrieved. Okay, so let me jump straight into the results. So this table shows 2 models. There's single pollutant model and then the 2 pollutant model. And the difference here is the single pollutant model only considers smoke and then other smoke-related exposure. The 2 pollutant model controls for the non-smoke ambient PM 2.5. Okay, so for the smoke, the single pollutant model, we see that being exposed to smoke PM 48 hours prior to the ED visit has a significant impact on the outcome. In addition to that, we define a major smoke event. This is a binary variable. A major smoke event is defined such that to more than 75% of the total PM 2.5 on that given day, right? So most likely in that situation, you will be able to actually see the smoke plume, okay? And then we included active fire spots. We included cumulative FRP as our exposure metrics. Fire points, or proximity to a flame, does not cause anxiety disorders. That's what our model shows. Fire intensity does not have any significant impact on anxiety disorders. But from the 2 pollutant model, we can see that, okay, when you're exposed to both ambient pollution and then fire smoke, now, well, fire smoke doesn't stand out as a extra risk factor. However, the second row of the table says that, okay, witnessing major smoke plumes will increase your anxiety to the extent that it actually shows statistical significance in our ED visits. And then we conducted age and sex stratified analysis to figure out, in the general population, is there a sensitive subpopulation? And that's what this figure shows. So the left column is age stratified odds ratios. What we can see here is that, okay, people, the elderly people, age 65 and above, they are significantly affected by fire smoke exposure. For younger people, 5 to 17 years old, 18 to 64 years old, fire smoke doesn't really make them super anxious. Now, if we stratify by age and also by sex, what we can see is, okay, in males and females, both the elderly population are more vulnerable to smoke exposure. The impact is both statistically significant. And for females, we see the adult females have marginal significance, age 18 to 64 and age 65 and above. They are more vulnerable to acute smoke population groups. So to summarize, wildfire-related exposures are indeed associated with an increased risk of ED visits for anxiety disorders. The analysis actually suggests two separate pathways, or one is through the inhalation of smoke, and that would cause your anxiety. So I consider this as a physiological pathway. The second pathway is more on the psychological impact, right? Just witnessing smoke plumes would increase your anxiety. You don't have to breathe fire smoke. Just watching it or experiencing that would cause anxiety. So that's a psychological impact. So that, the analysis speaks to the compounding effect of this phenomenon. It's called wildland fires. And it suggests, our analysis suggests that it's not only smoke. Smoke is not the only hazard associated with a fire. The second study is about lung cancer surgery recovery. And our goal, this is a collaborative project with the American Cancer Society. And our goal is to evaluate the association between proximity to wildfires and long-term survival after hospital discharge following lung cancer surgery. Let me see if I can hide this floating meeting controls. Okay, good. So here, the method that we took is that we compared the mortality hazard among individuals experiencing a wildfire event during recovery from surgery with the hazard among similar individuals who did not experience a wildfire during recovery between 2004 and 2019. This is a survival analysis, and we use the Cox proportional hazard model, adjusting for gender, geographic region, urbanicity, insurance type, comorbidity, tumor size, and more. And there's a special technique involved in this analysis. That is a inverse probability weighting to correct for immortal time bias. So for this audience, I'll do a quick introduction to that immortal time bias. So you can only expose it can only be exposed. So it's kind of a problem when you look at the study population, right? If we're looking at mortality as the endpoint, and then people who are exposed to the hazard and the environmental risk tend to live longer because living longer allows them to be exposed. Right? So this is called the immortal time bias. And then we developed a method to counter this effect. And I don't want to go into too much detail in the epidemiological modeling. But the interesting thing here is that the exposure is not smoke. The exposure here is defined as proximity to a satellite detectable active fire. Okay. So if an individual resided in the zip code where at least one satellite detected active fire within 12 calendar months after the date of discharge, follow this individual's lung cancer surgery, is co-located in the same zip code, this individual is considered, or this individual is defined as exposed. Okay. And the health data comes from the National Cancer Database that the American Cancer Society maintains. This is a very comprehensive database that includes more than 70% of all newly diagnosed cancer patients in the United States. And we focus on the dominant type of lung cancer, which is the non-small cell lung cancer. Again, I want to skip the methodological description and jump right into the results. During our study period, we included about 467,000 individuals in our cohort. About 16% of them nationwide were exposed to wildfire by our definition. This is an elderly population with a mean age at diagnosis of 67.3 years. And during this period of time, 126,000 people actually passed away. Lung cancer is a very deadly cancer. Before stage 4, so stage 1, 2, 3, surgery for treatment, right? And we're not studying the onset of lung cancer. We are studying the impact of wildfires on the recovery or the efficacy of the surgery treatment. And this table shows our results. The left column is time from surgery to wildfire exposure. Right column is the adjusted hazard ratio. What it says is, okay, if this patient after discharge from hospital experienced a wildfire within 3 months of his discharge, there's a 43% greater chance that this person won't survive after 12 months. So that hazard ratio is the likelihood to die, right? And then if this patient witnessed or experienced or lived next to a wildfire between 4 and 6 months after his discharge, there's 39% chance that he won't make it in 12 months. And this effect even remained after 6 months. 6 months, 7 to 12 months after this patient's discharge, if during this period of time he lived next to an active fire, breathing the smoke or not, there's 75% chance that he's more likely to die. And this effect remains true for different stages of cancer, which is pretty scary. You would think that, okay, if the patient is in stage 3 lung cancer is more likely to die, that is correct. But even in stage 1 or in stage 2 or in stage 3, as long as you live next to a fire, you're more likely to die. I think that's a scary part of of our finding. And then just to summarize, that the effect size of those hazard ratio values are way larger than those reported in air pollution epi literature. If you do follow that literature, we'd be happy to see a mortality risk of 1.1 or something like that. So this suggests that these patients are not only exposed to pollution. It's a compounding effect. There's the trauma as well as the physiological impact of that fire. And in addition to that, they could also be affected by many other factors. For example, they might be forced to evacuate. They will lose temporarily their usual care team. They would lose contact with their normal social support network, they would feel the anxiety that their property might be damaged by the fire. They may not be able to be in contact with their relatives or friends. This isolation, anxiety, loneliness could also have contributed to this very large effect size. But the exact mechanisms behind this large adverse health effect is unknown. So we don't really know what's causing such a dramatic change or dramatic worsening of their surgery outcome. And then the other finding I want to point out that despite the large fire sizes in the West, more exposure actually took place in the South, in the southern U.S. That's because people live a lot closer to fires. Okay. So the finding has some policy implications in how do we better prepare for disasters like a wildfire in this highly frail subpopulation. A few suggestions are listed here. For example, identify and contact these individuals recovering from lung cancer surgery. Keep a registry in the community, and design a kind of a portable medical card with diagnoses, treatment, care information listed there. Because once the person is evacuated, he may not be able to have access to his electronic health records. And it's also possible to think about building special needs shelters for not only lung cancer patients and other frail population. And then take measures to minimize exposure to contaminated, not just contaminated air, but also contaminated water and soil, and then develop mental health support resources. Okay, the third study that I want to show is about dementia, fire smoke and dementia incidence. Here we're using the national Medicare beneficiaries as our study population. This is a long-term study that kind of mirrors the many ambient air pollution epidemiological studies. And these long-term studies tend to show that chronic exposure to air pollution will generate the greatest impact, health impacts. We define 1, 2, 3, 5-year average smoke and ambient PM concentrations matched to the residence zip code. And this is an open cohort design. We only account for the first occurrence of dementia. And we stratify, and then we define some clean period and so on and so forth. Without troubling you with all the details, I'm going to, again, jump to the preliminary results. This is a very busy figure. I only want to point out one finding. That's this little boxes. What this figure shows is that, well, long-term exposure to smoke PM 2.5 will increase the risk of dementia. That's sure. But unlike column B, which is the base PM exposure, unlike ambient PM, the risk due to smoke exposure seems to accumulate. So the little boxes, the little blue boxes in column A continue to move rightward as we increase the exposure duration. And it has some pretty interesting ramifications here, right? It's like, as long as you are exposed to ambient PM, there's nowhere to hide. Because if you are exposed to it for a year, for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, the effect is almost the same. For smoke, however, if you move away from smoke, and by doing that, shorten your exposure duration, you can actually mitigate the risk. Right, so that's kind of new. And then here, if we think about this comorbidity issue, most of the elderly population have more than one health conditions. They're called comorbidities. People with dementia often have other health issues, and they may have stroke, depression, COPD, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, all the above. So what we found here is also kind of interesting, that in the basic one pollutant model, the associations between smoke PM2.5 and dementia is actually stronger in people without comorbidities. So the healthier elderly population have a greater risk of dementia when they are exposed to smoke. In contrary, the effects of ambient PM2.5 is more significant in those people with comorbidities. I don't know why this is happening. I think it warrants future research in this area. So I guess the key takeaway from this presentation is that wildfire impacts are multifaceted and dependent on the disease endpoints in question. Exposure can be smoke, it can be proximity to smoke, proximity to fire, or smoke contaminated environment. The health endpoints, the other side of the exposure can be trauma. It can be loss of property, loss of social network, loss of the care team, and all the anxiety associated with displacement, right? And the endpoints of the health risks are also very diverse. I just showed you 3 very distinct health risks: anxiety, in ED visits, cancer surgery recovery, and dementia. And wildfires are linked to all of them. And then the population at risk can also vary depending on the disease and the exposure at question. Sometimes they're women, sometimes they're elderly, sometimes they can be the healthier elderly, or the frail and sometimes invisible subpopulations like cancer patients during recovery, that the particular time period in their life makes them highly vulnerable. Okay, I know I've talked a lot. So just in closing, thank you so much for your time. Our group does more than just wildfire. We also study heat, air pollution, pollen, and other stuff. And the AMS Center, the CHART Center that I lead, focuses on urban heat islands and then population susceptibility to heat-related illnesses. Thank you for listening. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions if there's still time.
Thank you, Dr. Liu, for the great presentation. Please unmute yourself, excuse me, to ask your questions, or you can leave your questions in the chat box. We have about 2 minutes for questions before we move on to the next session.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, hello. Thank you so much for this very wonderful presentation. I have a question. So for the smoke PM2.5 post data, so you only measured the 2007 to the 2018, right? Have you considered updating those post data, for example, after 2018 until 2023 or 22?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, we're working on that. Like I said, the hard separation of smoke and non-smoke is pretty difficult. What we did is we used some CMAX simulations, and then that availability of the CMAX simulations actually limited our study period. So we are extending both backward and forward. Now, the backward extension can go up to 2002, but the forward extension is difficult when we encounter the pandemic, because the CMAQ emission inventory during the pandemic is highly uncertain. It will take some time or we have a more robust emission inventory and build our confidence in the CMAQ runs. But I think we can extend to up to 2020.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Dr. Liu. We will now move on to our first session, moderated by my colleague, Karin Arden-Dreyer. Karin, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. What a wonderful beginning with an excellent talk we had. And we have upcoming talks as well. Just a reminder for our speakers, every one of you will have 5 minutes, and we have Yan Hung with me here who will note you when you are getting to your last minute. So with no further ado, I'm just gonna introduce our first speaker. So Aaron, feel free to start sharing your slides.
I will do that.
All right, wonderful. So Aaron is coming. Aaron is one of the presenters from AMS talk, and he will talk about upping the tempo on air pollution observation from space for advancing health application. Aaron, the stage is yours. We can see something coming up. The slides are up.
Yep, let me try to do a screen share here. Hold on a minute.
All right, I'm here with you until we know everything is working properly, and
that should be showing now, I think.
We see it. You can start.
All right, great. Thank you for the invitation today. I didn't know the bandwidth of folks on the call here and the expertise level in terms of knowledge on tempo. So I'll give kind of a briefing on where we're at with tempo and kind of some new applications and products that are being generated on our end for this. I'll move forward here. I want to start off here with a animation of our tempo nominal operations that occurred on, this is an example from November 1st, 2023 here, showing how tempo performed at scans, or is performing at scans across the tempo field of regard. This is showing tropospheric NO2 right here. Let me go back. So we start our scans from all on the East Coast during the daytime. As we gain more daylight across the West, we're now performing the full tempo field of regard scans. And then you can see as we lose daylight in the East, we're more focused on the West region in the afternoon hours. So altogether, we're performing standard or nominal hourly operations and also optimized sub-hourly operations across the East and the West in the early morning and late afternoon. And of course, tempo is a geostationary satellite. Is in geostationary Earth orbit, and we're positioned at 91 degrees west right now. So I want to give a really quick brief down on our products. These are our baseline products for the mission that are going to be publicly available pretty soon. So we have ozone profile, nitrogen dioxide, formaldehyde, aerosol products, both level 2 and level 3. Our level 2 tempo footprint resolution is 2 by 4.75 kilometers squared, so very fine spatial resolution. On top of that, really unprecedented temporal resolution throughout the daytime for tempo. We are targeting our level 2, level 3 baseline products here for release date in late April or early May, so very, very soon in terms of that. We also have near real-time products on tap, but the public release date for those is targeted later on around the March 2025 timeframe. Very quickly here, I only have 5 minutes, but we also have additional products as well. One I kind of want to highlight here is SO2. This is being considered right now for production starting in 2025, and the public release date for these products are still TBD. Keep that in mind. We have accomplished a lot of great things with tempo. I don't want to go too much into this slide here besides noting again that we are approaching the time of releasing our level 2 and level 3 data products, and also targeting our near real-time products now that we are up and performing our operations. We have tools and other capabilities we're building for the mission for users to download and analyze tempo data. This includes our NASA Earth Data Search portal that's shown here. This is where our public data will be come late April or early May. We'll have tempo imagery available in WorldView. Hopefully folks all know about WorldView, and we're building a tempo ArcGIS dashboard as well for the Tempo mission, and the EPA has their RC Gateway in addition to this suite of tools. I just want to highlight really quickly here, this is a proxy data product, but the main thing, this is not real data right here. This was developed pre-launch, but I just want to note that this really important product from Tempo coming down the pipeline for monitoring tropospheric ozone pollution, where we'll have a PBL 0.2 kilometer ozone product in addition to tropospheric ozone. This will really enable robust monitoring of ozone concentrations throughout the troposphere and even in the boundary layers. So this product is on tap for Tempo and will really be an important facet of the mission. This is real data here. So I want to show tropospheric NO2. This is from that November 1st, 2023 nominal operation that I showed earlier in the animation, but this is zoomed in on Texas. And you can see a lot of different information here. Tempo is capturing high NO2 pollution from the urban areas, the traffic corridors. Let me go back here and play that one more time. So we start with scans in the morning here, and you can kind of see that the evolution of the NO2 pollution throughout this domain. Even the oil and gas operations out in West Texas are showing in the pollution, NO2 pollution transport from those, and the power plants as well. So if we go back one more time, you can see this area, traffic corridor of power plants, coal-fired power plants, where Tempo was able to capture and monitor the NO2 pollution from those as well in this domain.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nager. We need to go to the next speaker.
Oh, sure. No problem. Thank you.
Okay. Let's welcome the next speaker, Dr. Kumar from NSF UNCAR.
All right. So Aaron, can you please, I'm sorry, we're cutting you short. We really have to be on time with all of our speaker and make sure everyone will have the right amount of time. And this is rushing. This is like speed dating for science. So we're going to ask our next speaker, and thank you so much, Jan, for helping here. We're going to move to our next speaker, who's going to talk about enhancing air quality decision-making activity in Indian megacities using NASA satellite observation. We see the slide. The stage is yours.
Thanks, Karine. Let me go directly into my presentation. This whole project started because of an air pollution event that took place on 8 November 2017. It is now being called Red Letter Day in the history of Delhi. Air quality index reached 999. Actually, PM2.5 levels on that day reached 1500 micrograms per meter cube. And Indian Medical Association declared a public health emergency and called these conditions equivalent to smoking 50 cigarettes a day. There were a lot of reactions from the government. Delhi Chief Minister called the city a gas chamber. I already said this. And a person on average loses about 6.5 years of their life due to exposure to these severe air pollution events. So the question is, did Delhi residents get an early warning of this air pollution event? And so a WRF-Chem-based air quality forecasting system was operational in India at the time. And here I'm showing the time series of daily average PM2.5 based on the 24-hour forecast in Delhi from 10 October to 19 November 2017. And in black, you see the CPCB observations. In red, you see the model prediction during that entire period. And one thing that you can see that that the WRF-Chem was underestimating PM2.5 levels throughout this period. And when the severe pollution event hit Delhi, WRF-Chem even didn't capture the increase in PM2.5 levels. If you are wondering about this peak here, this was the Diwali festival, and it's related to the firecracker emissions. So the biggest challenge for us was how do we increase the accuracy of our predictions? And we did that by assimilating MODIS aerosol optical depth retrievals in the WRF-Chem forecasting system every day. So we initiate like a 72-hour forecast every day by assimilating both MODIS TER and AQUA AOD retrievals. So it is the same graph now, but with the blue color showing the forecast with assimilation of MODIS AOD. And now you can see that the model predictions are much closer to the observations throughout the period. And we had improvements of up to 200 micrograms per meter cube during this peak air pollution episode. even though we still have some work to do to capture the magnitude of the event. But this itself was useful information for the decision makers, as it could tell them whether they should plan for an anticipated air pollution event. On an average, we were able to reduce the mean bias in predictions of PM2.5 by about 86% on the first day, and which still remained to about 70% reduction in mean bias on the third day. But forecast are forecast. The decision makers also want to know which emission sources they can control. So I do not have a lot of time, but over the last couple of years, we have developed a decision support system, which actually predicts the contribution of different emission sources, not only in Delhi, but also from all the provinces or areas that are around Delhi. So this really helps decision makers understand what emission source they can control. Specifically, like for this period, it showed that Delhi transport and Delhi energy sector are the most important sources contributing to PM2.5. So final slide, what the decision makers are doing with this information. We are producing it on a public facing website. It goes to the Commission for Air Quality Management, which is the highest regulatory body. If there is a forecast for polluted air, then there is strict activity. And if you follow Delhi media, then you would see news like this: Delhi air pollution, NCR schools, colleges shut down, construction comes to a halt. And for cleaner air, they recommend to reopen the schools after pollution break, still keep some bans in effect. So this is a cycle that goes through the winter season. And with this, I'd like to thank you.
All right, and thank you for staying in time. We'll have plenty of time at the end. We have time for Q&A at the end after all our speaker. I saw Josh is already here. Josh, can you please share your slides?
Sure thing.
And since you have such a long talk, I'll let you introduce the talk, as I want to be mindful for your time and not take it. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. I've tried to shorten it as much as I can. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this. My name is Josh Colston. I'm an epidemiologist at University of Virginia School of Medicine, and this project that I'm talking about is PLANEO, Planetary Child Health and Enterics Observatory. Enterics is shorthand for enteric pathogens or enteropathogens, which perhaps better known as bugs, microscopic bugs that cause diarrheal disease, still a major cause of death in children in the tropics and subtropics where they're endemic, around 500,000 deaths a year, and can have lifelong consequences for those that survive, as most children do. But the important thing to know is diarrhea is a syndrome, and it can be caused by many different types of microscopic bugs, each of which is sensitive in different ways to the climate and the environment. We compile epidemiological data diagnosed by PCR about these bugs from multiple studies. We put them all together in a combined standard format in a way that can be used, and we have geographical information about samples tested, where the child that contributed them lives, what date this stool sample was picked up by a study, and we can match that spatiotemporally with environmental data for various purposes. Here is an example from the GLDAS suite of climate variables. This is an average of soil moisture over the year, but if you can imagine, we know the date and location of a child contributing a poop sample that's tested positive for some pathogen, and we can match that with what the climate conditions or hydrometeorological conditions were like on that date at that time. At that time and location, and you can imagine the sort of things we can do with that, like modeling pathogen-specific associations with the weather and the environment, which hasn't really been done before. Here's the result that we have from Shigella, which is Shigella is a bacteria, and there's some vaccines in the pipeline for it. So we wanted to model this, and you can see there's an animation here of how the predictions from our model, which you can interpret as the risk of Shigella infection given your geographical location, how it shifts over a typical year. You can see these sort of undulations in the risk going up and down in waves as the year progresses. And we can extract sort of time series of these parameters for particular locations, which is what's illustrated on the right of the slide there. So that's just the first pathogen of several, and we can characterize the relationship between specific environmental parameters and this one particular pathogen, which is quite a novel thing to be able to do. Dissemination is a big part of it. We're going to be setting up a dashboard of it. We're working on it now. We're sort of like working on a prototype, but we're going to make all this information about pathogen disease burden, both predicted and observed, available through an online dashboard and with a international consortium of investigators who contribute their data. Yeah, that's it. But thanks very much. We think this is a great tool, and it's going to be useful for targeting interventions to hotspots of particular transmission risk for specific pathogens.
Thank you, Josh. Very interesting.
Thanks.
I will ask you to stop sharing your screen because Daniel will share. Hi, Daniel. Daniel will share his screen, and Daniel will talk about physical activity dependence of relative temperature and humidity characteristics in young insufficiency active population. Daniel, we see the slide. The stage is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, I'll be talking about physical activity dependence on relative weather and relative weather characteristics. This has been published in the Journal of Physical Activity and Health. There's a QR code there if you want to take a picture and look at the full study. Physical activity, you might have heard this thought about physical activity or exercise as medicine, and it's a great sort of thought for that because it helps with cardiovascular health, bone health, the aging process, cognitive health, all these different types of things. So it's a great way for our general health and well-being. However, we see large impacts on physical activity due to the weather and climate. So generally, physical activity is positively correlated with temperature and negatively correlated with humidity, wind speeds, precipitation, but there are seasonal differences in these patterns. You can imagine extreme temperatures during the summertime would flip that relationship where you wouldn't want to go outside and engage in physical activity versus the wintertime. If you had an anomalously warm day, that would be better to engage in physical activity. And we see a lot of geographic variance and influence of climatic factors in this. So a study in 2022 by Ho et al. Looked at the maximum physical activity output across a range of temperatures and found that across 5 cities across China, there were different temperatures that meant the maximum of physical activity output. So it's really hard to compare different studies across different regions because we see this discrepancy of what the actual best conditions are for physical activity. So what I want to do was use a spatiotemporally relative weather typing system to see if we could come up with some sort of relative system to be able to compare regions and physical activity better. So just a brief methods. We looked at 81 subjects from central Pennsylvania, sedentary, but otherwise pretty healthy. Physical activity step counts were obtained via Fitbit smartwatch. And this was done for 6 months with among some other things here. The methods we used the global weather typing classification system, which is a gridded system, spatially temporally relative, meaning that each grid cell's categorization of humid, cool, warm is based on the conditions during that grid cell during that time of year. So we see changes across relatively comparable changes across all seasons and once you move into different locations as well. We did not include cold and warm front passages during our time because those are normally associated with precipitation, which are known to have larger impact on physical activity. So we just used the 9 3x3 square that you see here as our categories. We use mixed effects linear models to look at the impact of the weather along with some other variables on step counts. So the first model just looked at the weather typing. Second was weather typing and demographics. Third was included messages, and fourth included the COVID-19 pandemic because it fell during the middle of our data collection. So we had 8,190 person days in total. The graph on the left here shows average step counts for every day, and you can see the big drop off there around March 2020. Main results here, we see that across the first 3 models, we see significantly less steps were taken on humid, cool days and humid days as compared to seasonable, as where more steps were taken during dry and warm days. And once the pandemic was controlled for, we continue to see this humid, cool, negative relationship with physical activity remain. We also see a significant drop in the number of steps taken just because the pandemic had its effect on physical activity. Combining the cool, warm, dry, and humid weather types, we see that humid weather types were associated with negative step counts, which goes along with what we see in the literature. So some conclusions to wrap this up. For the first time, we used a spatially-temporally relative weather typing system to, we found established weather physical activity relationships were found to be present in a sedentary population of individuals. However, accounting for the pandemic, the analysis altered these results somewhat and opened up more questions. We'd like to, in the future, examine a larger population after the pandemic, whatever that means nowadays, to confirm these weather type physical activity relationships, look at seasonal analyses with more subjects, and expand the study to populations in other parts of the country to ensure the spatio-temporal relativity design works. And hopefully that gets us back on schedule a little bit as well.
That is perfect. Thank you so much, Danielle. And I already have a question to ask you. We were going to move on to our next speaker. Alexandra, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Oh, you're with a different name. All right, Alexandra, feel free to share your screen, and we're going to hear about flooding, urbanization, and public health.
All right, thank you so much. Okay.
Okay, we see your edit slide. If you want to switch between your slides. Try again. All right, perfect. It's perfect. The stage is yours.
Okay, so I'll be talking about flooding, urbanization, and public health in Kampala, Uganda. And I'd like to acknowledge my collaborators at Woodwell, Tufts, and Makerere University. So at the outset of this project, we really just wanted to focus on the intersection of urbanization and climate change. And Kampala is one of the fastest growing cities in Africa, and it has a current population of about 1.5 million within city limits, closer to 5 million in the urban metro area, and that's projected to more than double by 2035. A lot of this growth is occurring within informal settlements. And so these are just areas that are growing informally, but they're often used, the term is often used interchangeably with slums. And so these are areas that you see associated with a lot of poverty and a lot really lacking necessary maintenance and infrastructure and services. A lot of this growth is occurring at the expense of green space. And within Kampala, a lot of that green space is wetlands. It's built up right along the shore of Lake Victoria, and there's a lot of wetlands within and surrounding the city. At the same time, they're facing the impacts of climate change. And in this project, we were really focusing on changing precipitation patterns and mapping flooding within the city. However, when we met with a number of local stakeholders, what became very clear is that we can't talk about urbanization, climate change within the city without also talking about health impacts, which are very front of mind and which they're really feeling. So in the city, typhoid, cholera, and other diarrheal diseases and malaria are the top 5 leading causes of death in Uganda for adults. And then, of course, there's also the direct impacts of flooding within the city. And this is a photo that we took on one of our visits. This is in Kitugo Gaba. It's one of the informal settlements. It's essentially built in a wetland. And these days, it's just constantly submerged. So a lot of people have had to move their houses during these flood events and are no longer able to reside there. And just to show a map of the city, the map on the right, I like, even though it's old and kind of grainy, because I think it really nicely shows the wetland areas and how much a feature of the city they are. Again, you can see it along the shores of Lake Victoria in the southeast, and and then also to the western edge of the city. And then if we look at the satellite imagery on the left, again, you can just see how many wetlands there are throughout the city. And Kampala is originally built as a city on the 7 hills, where you have the palaces, the banking district now, universities on the hills, and then everywhere else is in these low-lying wetland areas, including a lot of the informal settlements. There are around 50 in the city, and the 3 that we looked at were Chifumbira, Icholi Quarter, and then Katugo Gaba. Thinking about how flooding plays into this, we started by looking at the precipitation associated with the 100-year, 24-hour flood event. And so at present, that's about 0.5 meter. Kampala is right on the equator, so it receives a lot of rain. That's projected to increase by over 50% by mid-century, and then more than double later in the century. And when we map the flooding, you see that a lot of it falls in the first 7 to 8 hours. We created an IDF curve, and then we project this into the future. We use SSP 585, and this is for mid-century. And then we look at the maximum flooding depth and aerial extent. We had a validation workshop in Icholi Quarter this January, where we shared some of these results and then invited the community to share their feedback and some of their experiences with flooding. And what was very clear is that our simulations were underestimating what they're experiencing, but there was also a lot of talk about waste collection, sanitation issues, just very underserviced. And even the fact that direct deaths often go unreported, despite the fact that they would receive a $150 postmortem because they would then have to move their houses. So next steps, continue our collaboration with Makerere University, working on participatory systems mapping, resident interviews to understand where and when is flood occurring and what are the health impacts, and then establishing a network of low-cost precipitation and flood gauges similar to the COCO-ROS system. And so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Very interesting. I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen. So our last speaker for this session, Chanud, I'm sorry if I'm murdering your name. Did I pronounce it correctly? No.
It's Chanud. Yeah.
Chanud, how's that part? Can you please share your screen with us?
Yeah,
so
let me get that.
All right, so we have our last speaker for this session. And after that, I'm going to ask all our speakers to turn on their camera and we're going to move to our Q&A session. We are still waiting for the slides, but we're going to hear about simulating Ads mosquito habitat for climate-informed diseases forecasting. All right, we can see the slide. The stage is yours.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak here. My name is Chanud Yasunayaka. I'm a PhD student at Johns Hopkins. And today the work I want to share is all about building up this modeling pipeline, investigating how climate variability impacts the aquatic habitats of mosquitoes, and what that might tell us about the incidence of mosquito-borne diseases. Oops, sorry. There we go. So yeah, the big picture motivation here really is that these diseases are such a global health concern, right? For our work, we're going to be focusing on one disease in particular, dengue, and on the dominant vector of dengue, which is Aedes aegypti. Now, to give a bit of context about where our work falls within the broader dengue narrative, here's a really nice schematic that shows all the different kinds of drivers of dengue. And this work really just investigates one branch of this complex web, as shown here. As mentioned before, we're also looking at the aquatic habitats of mosquitoes, which fall here within the system. And these aquatic habitats are these artificial containers where these Aedes aegypti mosquitoes like to breed. So this is our system of interest. And for our modeling pipeline, we're dividing up the system into 3 different steps of modeling. The first step is in simulating the climate impacts on habitat water dynamics. The second step is going from the water dynamics to the survival and development of mosquito immatures. And the third step, I won't really get into this because we're not quite there yet, is to assess whether the first two modeling steps can produce useful predictors of dengue incidence. Now, I'd like to leave you all with a nice, clear sense of what this pipeline looks like. So let's spend the rest of this time just kind of stepping through an example. Starting with step one. For example, let's look at Negombo, which is a dengue-impacted location in Sri Lanka. Here we see the dengue cases for Negombo, each line representing a different year of data. And here we see the meteorological data for the same location. I want to point out here that we see quite a bit of internal variability, both in the meteorology and the dengue cases. In the meteorological data, we see this variability in that the thin lines, which represent individual years of data, deviate quite a bit from the thick lines, which represent the mean over 20 years. And this internal variability is important because, we suppose that at least to some extent, the internal variability in meteorology must be driving the internal variability in dengue cases. So what we'd really like to see as we step through this modeling pipeline is that this internal variability persists throughout the modeling, such that by the time we get to the outputs of the modeling pipeline, those outputs might be able to predict the internal variability in dengue cases. So knowing this overall goal, let's step into the modeling. Step one is going from the meteorological data to the container habitat dynamics. And for this, we use this model called WATCHM. This model simulates temporal evolution of water height and water temperature. And we're running this in 1 month chunks for 20 years. And this is the kind of output we get where we see water height and water temperature for each month in our 20-year time span. Now, there's a lot going on here, but I just want to highlight that we are seeing the internal variability still. The thin lines vary quite a bit from the thick lines. Yeah, so that's our step one of this process, getting water height and water temperature. That leads us to step two, which is going from the container habitats to the survival and development of mosquito immatures. For that step, we start with the outputs from the previous step, water height and water temperature. And to these, we apply these thermal biology models, which let us translate the water height and water temperature into these more mosquito-relevant variables of survival factor and development rate. And as you can see here, we're still seeing this internal variability propagating through, thin lines varying quite a bit compared to thick lines. So that's where this research is at so far. We have these survival factors, these development rates, and what we really want to investigate is whether these new variables we've generated might be useful for predicting or explaining internal variability in dengue incidence. And by doing so, we want to see whether, going through all of these modeling steps might add value for eventually predicting dengue incidence. And with that, I will leave this little diagram up with conclusions, and thanks for listening.
All right, thank you so much. What an interesting panel we started this morning, this showcase. I'm going to ask all our speakers to turn on your camera so we can see all beautiful faces. All right, we have time for really one or two questions. I'm going to ask if you have any question for our speaker, please put them in the chat. So I'm waiting for people to type in. While I'm waiting for people to type in their question, I'm going to ask our first speaker, Aaron, the first question. I'm really excited to the data Tempa going to give us. How do you think the information will be for dust?
Yeah, so we will have an aerosol product, an AOD, and obviously we can. There are research partners who are thinking of PM 2.5 products based on that AOD information from Tempo, and even from a GOES ABI Tempo synergistic approach. So yeah, I think we will be able to monitor dust based on our Tempo aerosol products and future research PM 2.5 products.
Interesting. I'm looking forward to see that. Do we have any question coming in the chat? We'll let you think. We really have okay, we have the first question for our last speaker. On the graph of the years, there was on where the case were exponentially higher. Which year was this? And did you do any oh my goodness, didn't have enough coffee this morning. Retrospective comparative analysis to Aliquid if the metric you modeled were contribute to that year's caseload.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So this is about the graph of the dengue cases showing each year of dengue case data. And there was one year that like really spiked, and that was an outbreak year. I believe that would have been 2017. And your question was, your second part was about whether we've done analyses about whether our metrics contributed to that year's caseload. So that's kind of going to be our next steps in the work, is to connect the data we have so far, the climate data, the habitat information, the survival data, to the dengue cases themselves. So that's like coming up, and really excited to get started on that, really tie everything together. Thanks.
Interesting. Aaron, I'll just indicate you have a question in the chat if you want to follow up on that. Daniel, another question I came after hearing your talk. Are you planning to use any indication for impact of air quality on these measurements?
Yeah, air quality definitely has an effect. We saw that this summer, especially here in the Northeast with the Canadian wildfire smoke. We were not planning on, well, we didn't do it for this initial call, but it is something we can include in the future. Right now, because I was focused on heat, we decided to just look at temperature and humidity. But yeah, definitely air quality could be a part of that. And there are known relationships showing that air quality negatively impacts physical activity. So I imagine we would see a lot of the same impacts from that if we included it in future studies.
Interesting. I'll be definitely looking out for that. Let me see that we're not missing any question. We have, oh, okay, Aaron, follow up with Danielle. Do any of our speakers have question to other speakers? All right. Well, I'll ask, I believe probably what we have time for a few more questions. Rajesh, I have a question for you. It seems like on your last slide that there's still some tweak needed to be done with the model. Do you have any suggestions? I mean, obviously it's improved, but anyway, had to really tweak it to get the actual concentration?
Yeah, means so the emissions have very large uncertainties. So together with our collaborators in India, we have come up with a emission inventory at 400-meter resolution. And so our tests show that with those high resolution emissions, we are able to close the rest of the gap.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, will be very interesting to see where this will go and how to make the model really capture all the event. All right, I do not see any more questions in the chat. Is there anyone who has any other question?
Yeah, I guess I'll ask a question.
Yes, Josh.
Shanud, I was very interested in your talk, and it went by so quickly that I wasn't able to pick up on the details. But you're looking at, from my understanding, climate factors and how they affect mosquito populations in some way, and how are you incorporating lag times into that, lagged effects, and is there anything special about the fact that you're focusing on an island population? Is there anything different you would do that for a continental population?
Okay, so first question about lags, right? Yeah, so that's like a big important detail here, is that climate variables, all these will be have lagged effects. Like rainfall several weeks in advance will be what contributes to mosquitoes growing, or like mosquito abundance growing or falling, and then eventually becoming dengue cases. So that'll be also in the next steps, where we're looking at the dengue cases and building up a statistical model. We haven't figured out the details yet. If you have advice for that, I'd be happy to hear it.
We have approaches that we've used in the past, which I'd be happy to share with you. I don't know if they'd be the best for your situation, but yeah. It's a
Yeah,
question.
I mean,
It's a question that comes up all the time. So
That would be
Yeah,
a great follow-up and collaboration. Love it. That's exactly the kind of reason we're doing these things.
yeah,
All right.
And
I've
to your second question, I guess I haven't really considered how different the island scenario would be from the continental. We can also follow up on that if you have pointers.
I've seen a lot of these papers or analyses that focus on islands, I guess, because they're considered more like closed populations, and it's always interested me how that might translate to like a more open population in a continental country.
Make sure to switch contact information in the chat so you can continue follow this discussion. But I'm
thank you,
really
Shannon.
happy.
Yeah, I work with Ben and Lauren a lot as well, so we
That's
moved in
wonderful.
the same circles.
I want to thank each one of our presenter for this morning session. What a great start we had. I wish we had more time. I already have like a gazillion questions for other of you. But we are going to have a little break. We have time for a 15-minute break until 11:50 Eastern time. So feel free, go stretch. We know it's a long day. On behalf of both AGU GeoHealth and AMS Environmental and Health, I was happy to start this morning with you, and I'm going to hand it off to Azar.
Thank you, Karine, Jan, and to all our speakers for a fantastic dynamic session. We'll now take a short break, reconvene at 11:50 a.m. See you soon. Thank you.